Welcome back to another episode of Paella Week. We've done it the traditional way, we've made our sofrito. Today I want to show you how to make one of the more popular paellas, a paella that most people outside of Spain would associate the dish with, the seafood paella. It's very simple, you can add any seafood you like of course, but today, to demonstrate the process of maximum flavor extraction, we're keeping it simple with just one red prawn and some squid to show you a few techniques to get the most out of these ingredients. And of course, you can add everything in between and have a seafood feast if you wish. So first, we deal with the red prawn. Now, for prawns, for lobsters, for langoustines, I always like to extract the flavors in a three-stage process by first making the oil, making the stock, and actually cooking the flesh. So, to do that, of course, we need to separate the three. Very simple, grab the head, remove it, and we remove the shell, we have our flesh. One very important step before we make the oil is to extract as much gooey goodness from the head as possible. And this would really add flavor later to the paella or to whatever you're cooking. Even if you don't enjoy the aesthetic of eating the head of the prawn, the inside of the prawn should not be ignored. You must try it at least once. So, once we have everything out, these two, they go in the fridge for now. Hot pan, and we add a very generous amount of olive oil. This is going to be the oil we use to cook the paella. Now, the shells go in. So why make the oil and the broth separately? The reason is this beautiful, beautiful bright red color, not just from the red prawn, but from any other prawn, lobster, langoustine. They are fat solubles, not water solubles. So the wonderful color that you normally associate with a lobster bisque or a seafood stalk that you buy from the store, they come from the shells. And without oil, no matter how much you boil them, the color would not come with the stock. So, to give the paella the signature red color, along with the power of the saffron, we're extracting this beautiful bright red color along with some flavor by causing the Maillard reaction. Whatever protein that remains on the shell will react with the fat at high heat, giving us some more depth of flavor that we'll introduce to the paella. So if time permits, I normally leave it at medium-low heat for about 20-30 minutes. If you're in a hurry, cook it at a slightly higher heat, just make sure that it doesn't burn, and once the oil turns bright red, we're ready. So in our case, about 20 minutes. Once we have our beautiful oil ready, pass this through a sieve, and we continue the extraction by adding water to make our prawn broth that we'll use to cook our paella. Remember, eventually, you only need 3 times the liquid to the rice you're planning to use. So don't add too much water, otherwise you'll have unnecessary dilution. So we'll bring this to a boil and let it simmer on the side. Now, we deal with the squid. So, of course, squid, even when raw, is extremely flavorsome. But given this is 100% protein, by browning them, they will impart so much flavor and complexity to the dish, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. So, we want to chop them very fine so that they're at least similar size after being cooked compared to the paella rice. And this is the same principle for all the ingredients. We cook them according to their strengths. If you have something that's high in protein, like a scallop, searing it in the beginning would add flavor. Something like clams, less so. They should go in at the very end. Now, once you're happy with the size, we bring the stove back on. Let's break them apart. Cooking squid this way is incredibly interesting because they always pop as if they're trying to escape the pan. So just be a bit careful because there's a lot of oil. Don't stand too close. If they are at any point sticking to the bottom, that's absolutely fine. Because whatever burn bits we have, we're gonna deglass with this wonderful prawn broth. We want to first let them evaporate their water content, as you can tell from the steam, to concentrate their flavors. And once most water content have evaporated, they'll start to brown, they'll start to caramelize. The Maillard reaction, 100% protein reacting to fat and high heat. And while this is sizzling, let's talk about the paella pan. The pan so famous that the dish is named after it. Like I said before, for the home kitchen is very tricky because carbon steel by definition they do not heat evenly. And to cook the rice evenly, you need one even surface. To know your pan, you really need to know your stove. How do we really know our stove? Not by looking at the circles, because they could be deceptive. The best way to do it is simply by boiling some water, and you'll really see what your stove does. So, literally bring in some heat. Now, once this starts to boil, you can really tell how your induction stove or your stove in general is heating up your pan. In this case, it's this tiny, tiny circle. So imagine cooking paella here. These bits will be burnt before these bits even get cooked. So you need to find a pan that suits the heat your stove is generating. In this case, no bigger than this. And if you have to cook for a large group, we'll explore that in the next episode. Now, back to the squid. As promised, it's been splashing me already. So just be very careful when you move it and use a shield. I'm not joking. So, after I've been thoroughly splashed and painted into a lobster, we have a bit of color. So we now introduce the sofrito that we cooked yesterday. And since I was a bit lazy yesterday, we'll chop them up a bit more, just to provide a better texture for the dish. This will also stop further splashing, as now the squid has a friend. This goes back in. You see, I'm not even turning up the heat until they're fully in. That's how scared I am. Now heat back on, and we mix. Remember, the sofrito has been thoroughly cooked and it's been seasoned. That's why we haven't seasoned the squid yet. We want to merge the two and taste before we adjust our seasoning. Now we give this a final round of browning, and you can see the fond that we've built. At this point, we add our sweet paprika, just like the Valenciana recipe. About 1 teaspoon per serving. And immediately you can smell the sweetness from the paprika. Now, we start to deglass the pan with our broth. And you introduce them a tiny bit at a time, so you can still see the bottom, and you can scrape, picking up all the flavors from the squid. This will also immediately color the cooking liquid. And remember, 70% of the flavors comes from the broth. Same with this side. If you're doing this for the first time, it's good practice to measure the 3:1 ratio of liquid before you start adding, so you can be a bit more confident that you have ballparked the right ratio instead of having to eyeball it. Once the bottom of the pan is completely clear, we add the rest of the broth and we let the flavors emulsify. I mean, look at this. I'll happily have it as a soup right now. Before it boils, a few strands of saffron, they go in for that unique spice and color. And saffron is really overpowering, so please, please don't overdo this. Because the sofrito has been thoroughly cooked, the squid has been properly browned. We don't need the 15-minute cooking for emulsification. So once this is back to a boil, you're ready for the rice. But just like our previous recipe, this is the last chance to taste and adjust seasoning. Brilliant. A touch more salt. Once we're back to a boil, rice goes in. Once again, we shake the pan to try to form one even layer. We lower this to medium-high heat, and we let it cook for 20 minutes. If you've measured your liquid, you can safely walk away for the first 15, then you have to come back and mother it. And move it around once in a while just to make sure the heat is distributed equally. See you in 20 minutes. Now, once the water level has sunk below the top layer of rice, that's when you can introduce a lot of your delicate ingredients. For example, if you were adding clams, this is when I would add them. For the prawn that we chose to use, which is sashimi grade, you can even add it the very last minute, but for the purpose of demonstration, we'll add it now for the gentle steam to cook it to perfection. And to prevent it from curling up for presentation's sake, we score the bottom side. I mean, if presentation is not an issue for you at all, my favorite way to eat this is just to chop them up and add them at the very, very end to mix with the rice. So once you've scored the prawn, you think about how you want to present it, simply lay it right in the middle and push it down slightly. Since we know it's the final stage, we rotate, we move it around, we mother it. To do our best to burn the bottom correctly, the soccoradet. You know you have time when you can still see the steam. Once the steam kind of stops coming and you only hear a frying sound, that's when you have to be really, really careful. So there's a very thin line between sticky golden and burnt. Tilting the pan at the later stage, it's also a very good way to gauge how much liquid is left. In this case, not much. So this beautiful red oil we made in the beginning would start to slowly fry the bottom, which is exactly what we want. Now we're really frying. Beautiful. Now once the edges look slightly caramelized, we take the back of a teaspoon and you just check the bottom for stickiness. Now you can tell there's a bit of sticky goodness there. Of course you taste for doneness. In this case, perfectly al dente. So, and of course when you tilt, no water whatsoever, just a thin layer of oil. We know we're ready. So at this point, stove off, and we can dress the paella however you like. For me, we have the reserved gooey goodness. You can add them in the early stage as well, but you can also add them at the very end so that you can mix them in, provide a bit of contrasting texture to the beautiful burn bits at the bottom. If this is too much for you, you can add them just before the stock for them to cook and impart a lot of flavor. Now, we have some Instagram ingredients. We have some beautiful uni, sea urchin from Iceland, which we simply add. And again, you mix them in with the beautiful rice to add some wonderful taste and creaminess. This you definitely don't want to cook. A lot of uni pasta, they add the uni way too early and it tastes like scrambled egg. And now, once again, just for Instagram, we have the head we reserved earlier, which gifted us this beautiful stock. Of course, beautiful tail. And that's it. Maybe not as picturesque as the traditional pan, but in terms of flavor and the soccoradet you get, it's incredible. This is my variation of the seafood paella for the home kitchen. I really hope you enjoy. I forgot my champagne. Looks great though, huh? But now, the real moment of truth. Let's do it. Decent, I would say, huh? Slightly on the burnt side. Look at the color of these beautiful burnt bits. I think we've done okay. And of course, what I really want to do is to mix the uni and the gooey goodness with the rice. Just look at this. Uni, head, burnt bits, paella al dente, beautiful red color from the shrimp, the complexity from the squid. I mean, it's wonderful. I'm gonna get a glass of champagne. That's a wrap. Oh my God.